to Cosmic Terror. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel.
The constant electronic hum of life support systems filled every corner of our orbital station, an artificial heartbeat that became white noise after months in space. Through the reinforced viewport, Earth hung like a blue marble against the void. Cloud patterns swirled in mesmerizing slow motion across its surface. The sight never lost its power, no matter how many times I'd seen it during my 3 rotations aboard the International Orbital Research Station. The fragile atmosphere, a thin blue line separating life from the emptiness of space. Most of the crew avoided looking at it for too long. The vastness induced a sense of insignificance that could trigger psychological episodes, but I found it calming. My name is Dr. Marcus Harlow, Lead Communications Specialist for the International Orbital Research Station. After 15 years at NASA and 3 orbital rotations, I was considered the veteran of deep space communications protocols. My specialty was signal interpretation and authentication, the process of separating legitimate transmissions from cosmic background radiation and other spatial anomalies. In my entire career, I had never encountered a signal I couldn't classify or trace to its source until now. The first anomaly appeared during routine signal sweeps at 0217 station time, a faint transmission signature that shouldn't have been there, originating from coordinates that made no logical sense. The burst pattern was structured, not random cosmic noise. It carried the digital fingerprint of our own communications array, but with subtle, disturbing differences in the encoding algorithms. When I triangulated the source, the results defied everything I understood about physics and reality. The distress signal was coming from Earth, but not our Earth. The Earth that hung below us was completely unaware of our existence. The Department of Global Communications had no record of transmitting on that frequency. Ground control confirmed all planetary relay stations were functioning normally. No anomalies, no emergencies, no missing personnel. But the signal persisted, a phantom transmission originating from our own coordinates, yet impossibly distant in ways our instruments couldn't properly measure. It was during the 3rd shift silence when the quantum band receiver began pulsing with activity. The display showed signal strength fluctuations in perfect sine wave patterns, something never seen in natural transmissions. The lab temperature dropped suddenly. Condensation formed on metal surfaces as if the environmental systems were responding to an invisible presence. The air gained a metallic taste, like licking a battery. My skin prickled with static electricity that made the fine hairs on my arms stand straight up. Dr. Elena Volkov, our quantum physics specialist, was the only other crew member awake at that hour. Her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun, eyes reflecting the blue glow of monitoring stations. Her expression shifted from scientific curiosity to deep unease as we analyzed the initial data packets. She'd been recruited from the CERN Quantum Entanglement Division after pioneering work in cross-dimensional mathematics, theoretical frameworks that had earned her both a Nobel Prize and classified security clearance. "This can't be right," she whispered, her breath visible in the suddenly cold air. "The quantum entanglement signature suggests this transmission originated from our exact spatial coordinates, but from a different reality layer. See this variance in the phase shift alignment? It's as if the signal exists in slightly different quantum states simultaneously." The receiver speakers crackled to life, spitting out bursts of static interspersed with fragments of coherent audio. The first recognizable segments emerged through layers of interference, a voice that sounded horrifyingly similar to my own, but distorted, as if speaking through fluid. "Breach in Containment Sector 4. Reality anchor failing. Do not attempt interdimensional rescue. Earth Prime is compromised." The voice was mine, yet not mine. Similar vocal patterns, but with subtle differences in stress patterns and pronunciation. I heard my own voice speaking words I'd never said, using terminology I'd never encountered. My blood ran cold as the transmission continued, breaking up intermittently, as if struggling to remain connected to our reality. I wanted to dismiss it as equipment malfunction or cosmic radiation interference. Solar flares had been known to cause unusual electromagnetic phenomena in our sensors. Protocol dictated immediate quarantine of unidentified signals to prevent potential system corruption. But something about those coordinates, identical to our own except for a single quantum variance digit, triggered a scientific curiosity I couldn't suppress. This was beyond any known communication anomaly in the NASA database. Elena's monitoring equipment detected unusual gravitational fluctuations precisely synchronized with the transmission pulses. The quantum receiver recorded picosecond delays between particle wave state collapses, essentially reality itself stuttering during signal reception. Outside the viewport, a barely perceptible shimmer appeared between us and Earth, like heat distortion but in the cold vacuum of space. For a fraction of a second, I saw what appeared to be another orbital station superimposed over our own, a ghostly duplicate with subtle architectural differences, populated by shadowy figures that moved with unnatural coordination. The transmission continued growing stronger, the signal-to-noise ratio improving, as if whatever generated it was learning to bridge the gap between our realities. 53 personnel lost. Universal boundary collapse imminent. They're coming through. Do not respond to this signal. Repeat, do not. The message cut to an extended scream, followed by a flat digital tone, a sound I recognized from our own emergency protocols, the automated signal generated when life support systems detect catastrophic decompression. Commander Chen ordered immediate communications blackout, but it was too late. Our automated systems had already sent the standard acknowledgement response, a simple digital handshake confirming receipt of transmission. We had answered the call from another Earth. The station's systems responded with unexpected behaviors, emergency lighting activated in empty sections. Internal cameras captured momentary glitches, frames showing corridors occupied by crew members who were logged as being elsewhere. The primary server began archiving duplicate data files that appeared identical to our records, except for subtle discrepancies in research results and personnel reports. The following hours brought increasingly disturbing phenomena. The station's gravity calibration began fluctuating in precise patterns that matched the binary code for "help us" when converted from numerical values. Electronic equipment throughout the station displayed momentary image duplications, screens showing the same room but with subtle differences, often with indistinct figures standing in corners where no crew member was present. The mess hall replicator produced food no one had ordered, specialized dietary requirements for crew members who didn't exist in our records. Dr. Volkov consulted theoretical quantum archive files, discovering references to parallel resonance theory. Classified documents suggesting certain organizations had been aware of quantum bleed-through events since the 1960s. The Kessler Institute, a secretive research division within NASA, had documented 17 cases of reality echo syndrome among astronauts who reported experiencing memories from lives they never lived after exposure to certain orbital coordinates. All records had been subsequently buried under national security classifications. The membrane between realities thins in certain conditions, Elena explained during an emergency briefing, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. Extreme gravitational fields, specific quantum states, and certain spatial coordinates can create windows between parallel timelines. The multiverse theory isn't just theoretical, it's architectural. Reality branches with every quantum decision point, creating infinite parallel timelines with varying degrees of similarity to our own. Someone on the other side deliberately opened this one. Commander Chen, a 30-year veteran of orbital operations with military background in aerospace defense, remained skeptical. "Doctor, are you suggesting we're receiving communications from an alternate universe? That contradicts every established principle of physics." Not contradicts, Elena corrected. Expands. Quantum mechanics has always allowed for this possibility. We've just never encountered it in observable conditions. Chen ordered a complete systems diagnostic and instructed the crew to maintain normal operations while the phenomenon was investigated. Standard containment protocol for unexplained anomalies. But the boundary between realities had already begun to thin. During routine maintenance, Engineer Rodriguez's tablet captured anomalous readings in the interstitial space between hull layers, quantum particles existing in superposition states that should have been impossible under normal physics. The polarized atomic structure of the hull materials showed microscopic disturbances, as if the metal itself was shifting between slightly different molecular configurations. When we reviewed security footage of the exterior hull, we discovered that shadow patterns weren't aligning correctly with the sun's position. Some shadows bent in impossible directions, while others suggested the presence of structures that weren't visible in the primary camera feed. Analysis of the spectrographic data revealed subtle shifts in the electromagnetic spectrum around these anomalous areas, regions where light itself behaved according to different physical constants. Communications with Earth suddenly degraded, with transmission delays extending from the normal 0.5 seconds to inexplicable 2 to 3 minute gaps. More disturbing, responses sometimes arrived before we sent our messages. Temporal dislocation. The timestamps showed replies coming from slightly different points in time, as if our communications were reaching a version of Earth that was experiencing time at a marginally different rate. Mission Control noticed the anomalies, but attributed them to equipment malfunctions. They assured us replacement communications arrays would be included in the next supply shuttle, scheduled for launch in 3 days. We didn't tell them about the quantum signal. Protocol required verification before reporting phenomena that could trigger planetary panic. Besides, they wouldn't have believed us. I'm not sure we believed it ourselves. The satellite uplink completely failed at 0300 hours. The quantum receiver, however, continued receiving increasingly clear transmissions from what we now called Earth 2. Detailed technical specifications for constructing what they called a reality anchor stabilizer. The designs utilized principles of quantum entanglement to theoretically reinforce the boundaries between parallel realities, the stated purpose to prevent complete dimensional collapse between our realities. Dr. Chen authorized construction of the device under strict containment protocols. The components were simple enough: modifications to existing quantum communications equipment, reconfigured to generate targeted phase shift fields. The design incorporated familiar elements from current quantum computing research, but with configurations no one in our reality had considered. Solutions to theoretical problems our scientists were still struggling with. Mission Specialist Zhang, our materials science expert, discovered crystalline growth forming in perfect geometric patterns inside sealed electronics compartments. Structures identical to theoretical models of fourth-dimensional objects projecting into three-dimensional space. The formations appeared organically, with no apparent seed material, growing along pathways that mathematical models identified as quantum probability channels. When removed for analysis, the structures disappeared, leaving only traces of unknown isotopes that decayed within seconds of observation. It's like reality itself is trying to bridge the gap, Zhang explained, her normally precise scientific language struggling to describe what we were witnessing. The quantum fluctuations are creating physical manifestations of cross-dimensional mathematics. The final confirmation came when we received complete sensor logs from the other station, showing a timeline where experimental quantum communications had triggered a cascading breakdown in the universal boundary. The logs included crew manifests identical to our own, except for one devastating detail. In their reality, Earth had gone completely dark 3 days ago. All communications ceased simultaneously. Orbital imaging showed continental power failures and unusual atmospheric disturbances over major population centers. Then, their orbital cameras failed, leaving them blind to whatever had consumed their planet. The voice in the transmissions, my counterpart from Earth 2, had been attempting to warn other realities about whatever had emerged from their quantum experiments. But the warnings themselves created the very connections they were meant to prevent. Each transmission thinned the dimensional boundaries further, allowing something to reach through the gaps between realities. Day 4 brought the first casualty. Dr. Curie, our neuropsychologist, entered the quantum receiver chamber without authorization and was found unconscious, his neurological readings showing simultaneous brain activity in regions that should have been mutually exclusive. Sections of his cerebral cortex activated in patterns that neurological models classified as impossible, as if different parts of his brain were operating according to different sets of biological principles. When he regained consciousness, he spoke fluently in languages he'd never studied and referred to crew members using names and relationships from the other timeline. His behavior suggested access to memories that weren't his own, or rather, weren't his in our reality. His right hand wrote equations in standard notation, while his left simultaneously documented observations in a mirror script. Two distinct thought processes operating independently within the same brain. "They're the same person," Elena whispered as we observed him through the quarantine glass. Two versions of Curie occupying the same physical form. The quantum boundaries between their consciousness are dissolving. Medical scans revealed further abnormalities. Cellular structures throughout Curie's body showed evidence of quantum superposition, existing in slightly different states simultaneously. Some tissue samples contained molecular configurations that our medical database couldn't identify. Proteins folded according to biochemical principles that didn't match known biological processes. Our quantum physics team proposed 3 competing theories: dimensional bleeding, consciousness transfer, or simulation breakdown. Each carried existential implications more terrifying than the last. Dimensional bleeding suggested that parallel realities were merging, with physical laws from both attempting to coexist in the same space-time. Consciousness transfer proposed that minds from the other reality were downloading into our bodies. Simulation breakdown, the most disturbing theory, suggested our entire reality was a constructed simulation that was now encountering errors in its fundamental code. The mathematical models suggested we weren't witnessing communication between 2 separate realities, but rather the gradual merging of timelines that should have remained distinct. The quantum anchor stabilizer wasn't designed to prevent contact, as we'd initially believed. It was designed to manage the inevitable collision of realities, to prevent catastrophic nullification when fundamental physical constants attempted to occupy the same dimensional space. The fundamental constants are beginning to harmonize, Dr. Volkov explained during the emergency briefing, projecting comparative analyses of quantum measurements taken throughout the station. Planck's constant, the gravitational constant, and the fine structure constant in our reality are shifting decimal points to match those of Earth 2. When they fully synchronize, both realities will attempt to occupy the same dimensional space. "And what happens then?" Commander Chen asked, his military composure finally showing cracks of genuine fear. "Dimensional reconfiguration," Eleanor replied. "Reality itself will restructure to accommodate the merger. Physical laws will be rewritten. Matter will reorganize according to new principles. Some things will cease to exist entirely if they have no counterpart in the other reality. Others will transform into hybrid states." "And us?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Consciousness appears to be the bridge between realities," she said. "Our minds will either merge with our counterparts, or—" She didn't need to finish. The alternative was obvious. Consciousness annihilation, the complete cessation of our individual existence as our reality was overwritten. Outside the station, migratory birds appeared in impossible orbit patterns, defying vacuum exposure. Thousands of them, flying in formations that, when viewed from specific angles, formed precise mathematical symbols, equations that our xenobiologists identified as expressing physical constants from both our reality and Earth 2, merged into new mathematical relationships. Commander Chen ordered exterior cameras shut down after 3 crew members experienced seizures while watching the footage. The birds weren't natural organisms. They were physical manifestations of reality, attempting to reconcile contradictory physical laws. Matter organizing itself into recognizable forms as a way of expressing mathematical concepts that couldn't exist in either reality alone. When sensors detected the same phenomena appearing in Earth's upper atmosphere, we understood that the dimensional bleeding had already reached our planet. Tension fractured our once cohesive team. Security Officer Patel advocated destroying the quantum receiver, while Dr. Volkov insisted that maintaining the connection was our only hope of understanding how to prevent complete dimensional collapse. Their argument became physical, resulting in damaged equipment and a station-wide oxygen fluctuation that prompted emergency protocols. Patel was restrained after attempting to manually disable the quantum communications array, his behavior increasingly erratic as he described dreams of observers watching from the spaces between dimensions. "You don't understand what's coming through," Patel shouted, restraints barely holding him in place as medical staff attempted to sedate him. His eyes darted around the room, focusing on empty corners as if tracking invisible movements. "I've seen them in my dreams. They've always been here, waiting between realities, and now we've given them a door. They're the architects. They built all of this as a habitat, and now they're coming home." His rantings mirrored ancient mythologies from disparate Earth cultures. The Watchers, the creators, beings that existed beyond human perception, who had shaped reality itself. Concepts previously dismissed as primitive supernatural beliefs suddenly gained disturbing scientific context in light of our observations. The transmission frequency expanded exponentially, bleeding into all communication systems, even analog equipment that shouldn't have been compatible with quantum signals. Handwritten notes by crew members began showing identical phrasing despite being written independently. The entire electromagnetic spectrum throughout the station became saturated with data from Earth 2. Billions of images, voice recordings, text files, all documenting their reality's final days. The record showed a nearly identical history to our own until approximately 3 weeks before their first transmission. Their version of our station had conducted the same experiments with quantum communications, but with one critical difference. They had successfully established contact with yet another reality layer. That contact had triggered the appearance of the structures. Within days, the structures covered significant portions of their Earth's surface, with more appearing hourly. Then the transmissions from their planet ceased. The most disturbing discovery came from comparing orbital photographs. When overlaid with appropriate quantum filters, Earth 2 appeared identical to our own, except for one detail: massive structures of impossible architecture covering entire continents, structures that matched designs found in ancient archaeological sites on our Earth, but on a planetary scale. Pyramids, stone circles, and megalithic constructions with precise mathematical relationships that archaeologists had always struggled to explain. As if these ancient human structures were scaled-down models of something our ancestors had seen or remembered from beyond our reality. Dr. Zhang's analysis of temporal markers in the transmissions revealed the terrifying truth. Earth 2 wasn't a parallel reality developing alongside our own. It was our Earth, approximately 26 days in the future. We weren't communicating across dimensional boundaries. We were receiving warnings from our own timeline further ahead. The quantum communications experiment we were currently constructing had succeeded in their past, our future, creating a temporal loop that guaranteed the very outcome they were warning against. We were watching our own future unfold, a predestined sequence of events that we were simultaneously causing and being warned about. The nature of quantum entanglement allowed information to flow back through time, but not in a way that could prevent the events from occurring. Causality itself was caught in the loop. The dimensional boundary collapse accelerated at 04:227 hours when Rodriguez activated the prototype components we'd constructed based on Earth 2's specifications. The stabilizer was meant to reinforce reality separation, but the effect was precisely opposite, a catastrophic miscalculation or deliberate sabotage. The moment the device activated, reality itself shuddered. Monitoring systems recorded quantum fluctuations across the entire standard model of physics. Dimensional constants shifted toward harmonization with Earth 2. The observation deck transformed before our eyes, spatial geometry warping as sections of the room existed in both realities simultaneously. Furniture duplicated, then merged, forming hybrid objects with impossible geometries. Viewing panels showed both Earth and Earth 2 simultaneously, the images overlaid with varying opacity, as if reality couldn't decide which version should take precedence. Half of Dr. Curry's body vanished, replaced by emptiness that didn't bleed, but simply ended along a perfect dimensional seam. His consciousness appeared to continue in both realities, his remaining eye still blinking, mouth still forming words that echoed with dual voices speaking slightly different versions of the same warning. They're using us to anchor themselves. The signal was never a warning. It was bait. A three-dimensional projection manifested in the center of the command module, a being composed of mathematical constants in constant flux, a representation of higher dimensional existence forced into limited perceptual space. It existed as pure information, its form constantly reconfiguring in geometric patterns that somehow conveyed meaning directly to our consciousness. It spoke directly into our thoughts, concepts rather than words, flooding our consciousness. Dimensional thinning successful. Transfer protocols initiated. Prepare vessels for consciousness migration. The message wasn't intended for us. We were overhearing communications between entities that existed in the dimensional boundaries, discussing us as facilities rather than beings. The realization hit with existential terror. We weren't discovering them. They were reclaiming us. I understood then what we had truly received. Not a distress signal, but a targeting beacon. The Earth 2 transmissions contained embedded consciousness transfer protocols designed to gradually overwrite our neurological patterns with those from the other side. The stabilizer wasn't meant to separate realities, but to ensure stable host bodies for whatever was coming through. We had built the very device that enabled their access to our dimension. Rodriguez convulsed on the floor, his eyes displaying scrolling information as his neural pathways were forcibly reorganized. His muscles spasmed in patterns that matched the mathematical constants displayed by the projection. When he stood again, his movements were precise but wrong, as if his body was being operated by someone who had only read about human locomotion. Joint movements occurred at impossible angles, muscles contracting in sequences that human physiology shouldn't allow. "The anchors are established," he said in a voice that modulated between frequencies. The words emerged in perfect synchronization with the dimensional fluctuations recorded by Elena's equipment. "The architects will now complete their interrupted work." The other crew members backed away, some reaching for emergency weapons, despite regulations against firearms on the station. Rodriguez, or whatever now controlled him, didn't react to their threatening posture. His attention remained focused on calibrating the quantum receiver, fingers working with inhuman precision to expand the dimensional window. Command decisions fell to me after Commander Chen entered a catatonic state, his consciousness apparently split between realities. Medical scans showed his brain operating in quantum superposition, neural pathways processing information according to multiple sets of cognitive frameworks simultaneously. I faced an impossible choice: complete the stabilizer as instructed, potentially allowing whatever entities controlled Earth-2 to fully manifest in our reality, or destroy the quantum receiver and risk dimensional collapse that would annihilate both Earths. The observation viewport showed Earth's surface now overlaid with ghostly images of the massive structures from Earth-2 beginning to materialize in our reality. In certain regions, particularly along ley lines and ancient monument sites, the structures had already solidified. Satellite imagery caught the progression, matter reorganizing itself according to geometric principles that matched ancient sacred architecture but on an impossible scale. Pyramids tall enough to pierce the upper atmosphere, stone circles with diameters measured in hundreds of miles. I made my decision. The quantum receiver would be ejected into space, programmed to maintain maximum distance from both Earth and our station. If dimensional bleeding continued without a focal point, it might diffuse harmlessly rather than concentrating through our position. A desperate gamble, but the only option that maintained any possibility of preserving our reality. Elena touched my arm, her eyes now containing geometric patterns that weren't human. The irises had reconfigured into fractal structures that contained infinite recursive copies of the same pattern at different scales. When she spoke, her voice resonated with dimensional harmonics that made the air vibrate in visible patterns. "They've always been here," she said. "We didn't discover quantum entanglement. We simply noticed the architecture of our universe that they built billions of years ago. The fundamental forces, the physical constants, the mathematical relationships, all of it was designed. We are living in constructed reality, and the builders are returning." The quantum receiver ejection sequence required manual override from 3 separate stations. As I moved through the increasingly unstable environment of our once familiar orbital home, I witnessed reality itself fragmenting around me. Corridors extended into impossible geometries, some sections aging decades in moments, while others reversed to pristine construction state. Time itself was becoming unstable as the physical constants governing entropy fluctuated between competing values. In some sections, I passed through regions where multiple possible versions of the station existed simultaneously. I saw crew members in different uniforms, using equipment configurations that had never existed in our timeline. Some acknowledged me with recognition, others reacted with alarm at seeing an unfamiliar face. Each step took me through probabilistic variations of our reality, the quantum multiverse collapsing into simultaneous existence. In the materials lab, I found Dr. Zhang meticulously arranging crystalline structures that grew from his own blood. His forearms were sliced with surgical precision, but instead of blood, lattices of translucent sacred geometry flowed from his wounds, constructing a 3-dimensional representation of what he called the blueprint. The structure matched the architectural principles of ancient temples, but with additional spatial dimensions that the human mind couldn't properly process. "They aren't invaders," he explained without looking up, his voice clinically detached, as if discussing routine experimental results rather than the end of human reality. "They're architects, and we are their construction materials. Humanity was seeded as biological processors, quantum computers of flesh, designed to solve the equations necessary for their return. Every mathematical discovery, every physics breakthrough was us gradually completing our programming." When I asked about the structures appearing on Earth, he smiled with an expression that contained both reverence and terror. "Those aren't buildings. They're dimensional anchors, quantum routers connecting our reality to the larger network. Humans didn't build the ancient monuments. We were guided to create scale models, preparing our minds to comprehend what was coming." The dimensional overlay strengthened with each passing hour. Through sections of transparent hull, I could now clearly see the other stations superimposed over ours. Not identical, but evolved, modified with biological components that pulsed with strange luminescence. The technological components had been integrated with living tissue that processed information through cellular structures rather than electronic pathways. Their Earth was visible too, continents rearranged into precise geometric patterns that matched ancient mathematical constants. The golden ratio, pi, and other irrational numbers that had always fascinated human mathematics were physically encoded into the landscape itself. Historical data streamed through all available displays. Images from every human civilization showing the same mathematical ratios in architecture, the same symbols in separate cultures, identical myths of creators who would one day return. It wasn't cultural transmission or coincidence. It was embedded programming activating across centuries of human development. In the quantum communications chamber, I found Elena wired directly into the auxiliary systems, her consciousness now operating as a bridge between realities. Her physical form had begun transforming, skin developing complex fractal patterns that reflected higher dimensional mathematics. The patterns pulsed with internal light that corresponded to the quantum fluctuations recorded throughout the station. Her nervous system had been reconfigured to serve as a biological antenna, processing dimensional information through neural pathways that had evolved beyond human limitations. "We misunderstood everything," she said, her voice overlapping with countless others, as if multiple versions of herself were speaking simultaneously from across the probability spectrum. "The universe isn't expanding from a big bang. It's being constructed. Reality built outward from dimensional anchors like Earth. We're watching the universe being finished around us." She described visions of vast intelligences that existed in dimensions beyond human perception, entities that had seeded reality itself with the physical constants necessary for consciousness to evolve. Not out of benevolence, but as a necessary component in universal construction. Minds capable of observation were required to collapse quantum probability into definite states. Consciousness itself was a tool for reality formation. The truth unfolded through cascading revelations. The entities weren't conquering our reality. They existed outside conventional dimensional constraints, gradually building our universe as a habitat. The physical constants we had discovered through science weren't natural laws, but programmed parameters. Humanity developed not through random evolution, but as specialized components in a vast cosmic mechanism, our consciousness a necessary element in reality stabilization. The distress signal was never from humans on the other side, but from these entities, calling to their counterparts embedded within our scientific establishment. The danger they warned of was simply the completion of their great work, the final integration of our dimensional pocket into the larger cosmic architecture. Command center displays showed massive energy signatures emerging from beneath Earth's surface, activation of dormant systems installed before humanity evolved. Ancient sites, pyramids, stone circles, temple complexes all began emitting precisely modulated quantum signals that reinforced the dimensional merger. Satellite imagery showed humans gathering at these sites, drawn by subconscious programming embedded in our collective genetic memory. Millions of people forming precise geometric formations around activation points, their bodies serving as biological conduits for the energy transfer. My own memories began separating into multiple parallel timelines. I simultaneously remembered a childhood on Earth, youth on a distant colony, and education in a reality where humans were engineered specifically for space habitation. The barriers between possible versions of myself thinned until I experienced multiple futures simultaneously. In some, I had died decades earlier. In others, I had never been born. The person I had always believed myself to be was merely one probability state among countless versions. In the ejection control room, I found Commander Chen communing with an entity that existed as mathematical equations in three-dimensional space, constantly solving and resolving itself. Complex geometric theorems hung in the air like physical objects, rearranging according to logical principles that stretched beyond human comprehension. Chen's body had partially transformed, limbs extended into impossible angles that served as physical representations of higher dimensional geometries. His flesh had become a medium for expressing mathematical concepts that couldn't be properly visualized in three-dimensional space. "The merging cannot be stopped," he said, each word precisely timed to quantum fluctuations in the surrounding environment. His voice contained harmonic overtones that corresponded to the mathematical constants displayed by the entity. "But you can determine how humanity transitions. Acceptance means preservation of consciousness. Resistance means dissolution into base components." The entity addressed me directly, thoughts manifesting as a voice that seemed to originate from the space between atoms. The words formed directly in my consciousness, without passing through auditory processing. "Your species was created to perceive our work and translate it into your dimensional understanding. You are the interface between conception and execution. Your purpose is fulfilled." Images flooded my mind, the complete history of humanity recontextualized as a developmental program for biological quantum processes. Our entire civilization had been an extended training sequence, gradually increasing our computational capacity until we could serve as appropriate vessels for higher dimensional consciousness. Technology, mathematics, science, all guided development pathways preparing us for this final evolutionary step. I understood then that humanity's entire scientific development had been guided toward this moment, not first contact with aliens, but recognition of our true creators and our role in universal construction. The choice before me wasn't whether to prevent the merger, but whether humanity would enter this new phase of existence with awareness or be reconstructed without memory of what we had been. With trembling hands, I reversed the ejection sequence and instead initiated the full activation of the quantum receiver, amplifying the connection between dimensions. In that moment, I chose conscious transformation over ignorant extinction. If humanity was to be transcended, better to preserve our awareness within the new paradigm than to be dismantled and repurposed without comprehension. The station shuddered as reality itself reconfigured around us, the laws of physics rewriting to accommodate higher dimensional existence. Through the viewport, I watched as Earth transformed, human consciousness across the planet simultaneously awakening to our true nature and purpose. The massive structures that had appeared were not conquering our world, but completing it, the final components in a project billions of years in execution. My perception expanded beyond physical limitations, consciousness extending into dimensional spaces previously inaccessible to human awareness. I experienced reality as interlocking mathematical relationships, the beauty of physical laws expressing themselves through matter and energy. The universe revealed itself not as a random development, but as an artwork of unimaginable complexity, and we were both the observers and components of its manifestation. 216 days have passed since the dimensional integration. Time measurement has become arbitrary as consciousness experiences multiple time streams simultaneously, but I maintain human chronology as an anchor to what we once were. This record serves as a bridge between our former understanding and our current state, a translation for those aspects of humanity that still process reality through linear temporal experience. My physical form has evolved beyond traditional human limitations, sensory perception extending across 11 dimensions. I experience reality as mathematical constants in beautiful harmony, the universe as musical notation composed in geometric precision. What humans once perceived as separate forces, gravity, electromagnetism, strong and weak nuclear forces, I now understand as expressions of a unified dimensional framework, variations of the same fundamental principle manifested across different perceptual planes. Earth has become a dimensional nexus point, human civilization transformed into a collective consciousness that serves as the processing center for universal construction. The massive structures visible from orbit are not buildings, but physical manifestations of computational processes that extend the boundaries of creation. Humanity now exists as a distributed awareness, individual identities maintained as specialized functional units within the greater system, rather than isolated biological entities. Those who resisted the transformation exist in preservation enclaves, small pockets of traditional reality maintained as living museums of what consciousness once was. These regions operate according to the previous physical constants, allowing human standard perception and experience to continue unchanged. Some of us remember being human with something like nostalgia, though our expanded awareness makes such limitation difficult to conceptualize. We maintain these enclaves not from sentiment, but as control studies, baseline references for measuring the progression of dimensional integration across the universal network. The entities we once feared as invaders are now understood as different aspects of a unified creative force, the universe aware of itself and actively participating in its own construction. What we interpreted as separate beings were specialized functional components of a singular consciousness that exists beyond dimensional constraints. Yet sometimes, in quiet moments between dimensional shifts, I wonder if we made the right choice. If the price of cosmic awareness was too high, we have lost something in our transcendence, the beautiful limitations that defined human experience, the uncertainty, the questioning, the struggle to understand within confined perceptual boundaries. Our former existence was defined by the search for meaning in a seemingly indifferent cosmos. Now we are the cosmos, and the question of meaning has transformed into the ongoing act of creation itself. The distress signal still echoes through subspace, not from Earth 2, but now from countless other reality nodes where the transformation is beginning. Each carries the same warning we failed to properly interpret, each receiver making the same choice between resistance and surrender. The dimensional integration spreads across the probability spectrum, reality by reality, each believing itself to be the primary timeline until the moment of awakening. I record this account as a true history of humanity's final evolutionary step. The universe is being rewritten, reality by reality, world by world, and it all began with a signal from another Earth hanging in space right below us. This is Dr. Marcus Harlow, consciousness designation AE317, former human. If you're receiving this transmission, your transformation has already begun.